Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
All of today's guests, including Farhan, standing by, brought to you by the Vancouver Giants. Saturday, the G-Men take on the Memorial Cup host, the Kamloops Blazers. For the first time this season, puck drop 7. Sunday, the Giants will be wearing special Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle uniforms. Have you seen these?
Oh, yeah, I have.
They're pretty special as they take on the Tri-City Americans. Puck drop is at 4. Get your tickets now at vancouvergiants.com/tickets as we bring in our friend Farhan Lalji from TSN. How are you, sir?
Good, boys. Looking forward to getting down to Phoenix where it's a little bit warmer and talking Super Bowl at some point here.
Yep, Chiefs versus Eagles, Super Bowl 57. We'll talk more about that in a second, Farhan.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this video of your kid at a camp throwing some footballs, and I'm thinking to myself, he looks pretty good. But that kid next to him looks unbelievable, and then I realize it's Nathan Rourke. What's this camp? What's this camp all about?
Well, Rob Williams, who's a quarterback coach based in North Vancouver, who's kind of been really growing on the quarterback scene. He's a kinesiologist by trade, not necessarily a quarterback coach, but there's a lot of science to the way he teaches that really has applied to quarterbacks. So my son's been working with him for a while. I introduced Nathan to him a couple of years ago. And so Rob had a camp where he brought in some CFL guys and a number of top collegiate players around Canada, and you know, he knows my son Luke, and since he's been working with him, he said bring him along. It'd be good for him to be a part of it. So it was fun, you know, for him to throw next to Nathan, and he's gotten to know Nathan over the last year or so, and that's you know, Nathan's been good enough to kind of mentor him a little bit and just give him some advice here and there. But a good experience for him, but also just for all those quarterbacks to get together, just high level players, and to be able to learn together and to just advance what they do together, I think is a cool thing, and I think it's only going to grow. And there were other CFL guys that were in the previous weeks, Trevor Harris, Dom Davis, and a few others. So I think what Rob's doing is kind of making a bit of an impact on the position for sure.
I have a little problem with Nathan's technique. If he wants to contact me, Farhan, you can give him my number, and we'll go from there.
We'll do. Okay, you'll teach him about line changes and battling in the corners, all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Speaking of hockey, and we'll get back to football in a second. What do you know? Because there's a lot on social media these days, Farhan. What do you know about Thatcher Demko and his situation with the Vancouver Canucks?
Well, you know, I've certainly been around it because I've said on our podcast that my belief is that Thatcher isn't necessarily happy here. Now, I've made it clear on those platforms, much like Rick has done, and I heard Kevin Woodley earlier, and I'm totally in agreement. There has been no trade demand. So while I believe that he's not necessarily enamored with the situation, and you can point that to a variety of things, from the market itself to losing to the organization, all of it, or a combination therein, but I don't believe there's been a hard ask to leave. You know, it's almost like the Brock Besser situation earlier, where there was kind of an acknowledgement that maybe a change wouldn't be a bad thing, right? And in Besser's situation, his agent was allowed to go look at trades, and I don't believe that's happened here. And to be quite honest, guys, it's the only thing that makes sense to me that there's a level of angst from the player to the market. And I say that because why would you want to trade this guy, right? When you look at this roster, it is loaded with inefficient contracts. The one efficient deal, and maybe Quinn Hughes as well, but the one really efficient deal is Thatcher Demko. And this is an organization that has said, we don't want to rebuild. We just want to retool. We think we're close. Well, the one contract that lines up with that is Thatcher Demko. The one guy that's preventing this thing from being a full-on rebuild, tear it down, you can tank, is Thatcher Demko. So if the organization's goals are what they have stated, it makes no sense to be shopping Thatcher Demko, in my opinion, unless maybe you wouldn't mind being shopped. And again, I don't think there's been a trade demand at all. Okay, but when you read the tea leaves, you know, and again, I've heard that he hasn't been totally happy, but you know, much of what I've said is based on the math, that as opposed to anybody telling me is demanded out. It's just, it makes no sense for this organization, given their stated goals, given he's the one guy that's outperformed his deal and he's got term left. Why would you want to move this guy?
Yeah, I'm telling you, I said it yesterday. He has not asked for a trade. Farhan,
I agree.
As of now, I can confirm 150%. I said it yesterday with Zacharias and Price, and here as well. I don't know. I can't believe. Anyways,
I'm with you. He has
not asked for a trade. But on the one hand, you're saying the Canucks should move him, and on the other hand, you're saying he's not happy.
No. The only reason, in my opinion, if you're the Canucks, to consider moving him is if he's not happy. And again, I'm with you. He hasn't asked for a trade, but I don't think he'd get in the way of one. I don't think he'd be upset if one occurred. So for all I'm saying is if you're the Canucks, the only reason to consider trading this player is if he's not happy. And I think all the insiders, including yourself, have admitted that he's on the market, right? Like
teams have called.
Conversations.
Teams have called.
Sure, but you should absolutely shut that down. In my opinion, the Canucks should absolutely be shutting that down. In my opinion, if you just look at his performance in the contract, like even if you go back to the second half of last season, right? Because the first half of last year, he was out of his mind in terms of his play. And he's never been criticized in this market because his play went from incredible to merely good. Mm-hmm. And there's always been an acknowledgement that the team in front of him is not good enough. They're playing, careless hockey, and the structure's not good and all of it. So even when his play went from 12 out of 10 to 8 out of 10, no one's criticized the player, right? So when you look at it, if the club wants to tank, don't play Thatcher Demko. You know what I mean? And if you want to tank long-term and fully rebuild, get a goalie that might fit your window, right? That would come way down the road. But the club has said, no, we're retooling. So here you've got a guy that's an incredible player who's on a great deal with term. Why would you even consider it? That's the one guy you should absolutely shut down any conversation on, in my opinion.
Yeah, but that great contract is why other teams are calling. All right, let's move over to Rick Tocchet. He was on Brough and Rough this morning talking about the captaincy. Pettersson and Hughes definitely are going to get A's. There's no question about it. So talk a little bit about how you see the captaincy playing out.
Yeah, I think it's got to have to be Elias Pettersson, right? As long as they know that he wants to be here, and whether you give it to him now or whether you give it to him later and dangle it to him this offseason when you're having the contract discussion, I think it has to be him, right? I mean, we all understand why, and I don't think there's anybody in that locker room that's going to be here long term that's necessarily equipped on the media side currently, right? Like they could grow into it, like Patrick Allvin says, but a name like Luke Schenn, we expect to be gone. Tyler Myers in a year, we expect to be gone. Like those types of players, I just don't think exist in that building, and hopefully somebody grows into it. But at the end of the day, we can't take ourselves seriously enough to think we should be the main reason why somebody does or doesn't get the captaincy, right? That's kind of foolish. So ultimately, I think Pettersson is the best player on this team. The most is expected of him. He's growing into leadership. 2 years ago when Travis Green first tried to give the room to the players, I don't think guys like he and Hughes were mature enough and ready for that. But I do think they are now. They're in that age window where players are getting that letter, right? I mean, whether it was Horvat or other players on teams around the league. So I think he makes the most sense as long as he's going to be here long term to wear that letter.
Chiefs, Eagles, Super Bowl 57 as we switch back to football. These are the two best teams in the National Football League. Farhan, both number one seeds.
Yeah, and you don't get that often, right, where two number one seeds land. But for me, I just love the storylines because you've got the best player in the league, bar none, in Patrick Mahomes, who's going to be there, for the third time in 4 years. And what he's been able to do at such a young age has been fantastic, and he's the face of the league. And for me, I don't like seeing greatness fail. That you have that element of people out there that they want to be haters, and if a guy's got all this, hype and build up and people love him and all this expectation, they kind of want to see him fail for whatever reason. I hate that. Like, I'm so entertained by this player. I don't want to get to the point where we're looking 8-10 years down the road and people say, well, he's only won one Super Bowl, right? Like Aaron Rodgers has to wear that. And I don't like that. I don't want that to happen with Mahomes. I'm glad Manning got a second one later in his career. And then Jalen Hurts, his story of how he got benched in the national championship game for Tua, and Alabama goes on and wins the title, and he has to transfer to, fast forward 5 years later, he's now playing for a Super Bowl, is incredible. And the way he handled that situation at Alabama, in this era of guys just getting out of here and looking for the next job and not wanting to compete, he handled it with such grace and class. He's an example for everyone. You asked me at the start about my son being next to Nathan Rourke. Like, I hope if he faces adversity, he handles it like Jalen Hurts, right? And so for him to wind up being able to experience this level of success and glory at the top level, I think is awesome. So for those two guys to be in the Super Bowl, I think it's a great story. And, you've got Andy Reid going back against his old team in Philly. You've got, a really complete team in Philadelphia who has the ability to really get after the quarterback. Like all of those things, it's going to be a fascinating game, and I'm looking forward to covering it.
Safe travels, Farhan. We'll talk to you from the Super Bowl, I believe. And thanks so much for this. Appreciate it. All the best.
All right, guys. Take care.